Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas, and I'm excited today to be back with one of our overseas afternoon events. We have SJ Bennett joining us to talk about The Windsor Knot, which is her new mystery, absolutely delightful, highly recommended, featuring Queen Elizabeth II. So before we get to that, I'm going to go ahead and do some housekeeping, and we will bring her on shortly. So as I say at the beginning of every one of these, just a friendly reminder that Murder by the Book is open. We are there Monday through Saturday, 10 to 6, and we have limitations on how many people can come in the store. Masks are required. We provide hand sanitizer, gloves, anything that you would like, we have if you don't have it, in order to make a safe browsing experience. So we would love to see you. If not, we're still doing curbside pickup and a promotion on free shipping over a certain point for online orders. Tonight, for those of you who like historical mysteries, we will be talking with Mariah Fredericks and Jess Montgomery. And then on Saturday night, we have our kind of special quarterly thing where we all talk about the books we're loving. So we're having a Murder by the Book Recommends Spring Edition, and we will all be talking about the brand new releases or very soon forthcoming titles that we are loving right now. And rest assured, Windsor Knot will be part of that discussion. We also still have signed books available for the event with Harlan Coben and Michael J. Fox next week. All of this event information can be found at murderbooks.com. If you have any questions, I'm actually right now going to drop a link in the comments, both on YouTube and Facebook, for more information about Windsor Knot or to order it. But if you have any questions, don't be shy. Please pop them in here and we will get to them for the second half of the chat. So enough of me. I'm going to bring out Sophia and we'll get her introduced and start this conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, McKenna. It's lovely to be here.
It's lovely to chat with you. Like I said, we absolutely loved the book. Let me go ahead and get your introduction out of the way and we'll start talking about Windsor Knot. SJ Bennett gained her PhD in Italian literature from the University of Cambridge and was a strategy consultant at McKinsey Company before becoming a professional writer. She's published 10 books for teenagers, winning the Times/Chicken House competition for Threads in 2009 and the Romantic Novel of the Year award for Love Song in 2017. And like I said, she is here today to talk about this delightful bauble of a book, The Windsor Knot. So it's so nice to meet you. You know, we're in a pandemic and we don't get to meet that many new authors now, but yeah, even virtually, this is such a treat. At what time are you in the UK right now?
So yeah, I'm in London and it's 7 o'clock in the evening and I'm really sorry it looks so dark here, but yes, because I'm wearing glasses, if I put my ring light in the perfect place, then all you can see is ring lights. So yeah.
Oh, I know that struggle. I have mine up and angled across the room or something because yes, it's so
brilliant.
hard.
I need to copy whatever it is you do. It's amazing.
Well, we're doing these, you know, every night of the week. We had to figure out pretty quickly what our virtual event studio was going to look like. Okay, so let's start in with the book. Just tell me briefly about Windsor Knot.
Well, it's the first in a series. I hope that a long series. And it's set in 2016. And the Queen, the one that we know, the Queen is about to turn 90 and she's at her favorite place, which is Windsor Castle, which is where she spends now every day, but usually just a lot of her weekends. And there's a murder at Windsor Castle. An entertainer for what they call a dine and sleep, which I can talk about, is found dead. And the Queen doesn't like the way that MI5 are taking the investigation because they're starting to suspect her staff and the atmosphere is getting very bad. So she decides to solve it for herself. And it turns out that this is something that she does on a regular basis.
That's very fun. So she's also helped out by a great character, a really fun character who I also hope will be reappearing, Rosie O'Shoddy, her private secretary. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. So why don't you tell us about their relationship and what she does in the book?
Oh, I'm really glad to talk about Rosie. Yeah, when I set out to try and write the books, I realized really quickly that I wanted to write about contemporary London. I mean, the series will go back in time, but for the first 4 novels, which were set in 2016-17, I wanted them to feel really contemporary. And my London is very multicultural. And I teach writing, and my students come from all sorts of different ethnicities and backgrounds. So I really wanted Rosie to reflect that. She has a job that I interviewed for in the late 90s. So I was between jobs. I was setting out to be a writer. It wasn't working out at all. And I was asked if I would interview to be the Queen's assistant private secretary at Buckingham Palace. And I spent an hour in Buckingham Palace being interviewed for this job. And if I passed that interview, then I'd been interviewed by the Queen. But I didn't get it. But Rosie has got the job. And she is a Nigerian Londoner. So her grandfather came over from Nigeria. And he came from a poor family. And the only job he could find in London was washing bodies at the morgue. And then her father drove trains on the London Underground. And Rosie worked incredibly hard at school, and she got a great degree, and she joined the army, and she had a really good army career, and she joined a very prestigious bank, and now she's working for the Queen. And she is the eyes and ears. So the Queen can't go everywhere and, find things out, obviously. So she sends Rosie out to do it. But to start with, Rosie doesn't know this is what she's doing. So she kind of has to work it out for herself.
That's great. So you mentioned that not only this book, but several of them are going to be set in 2016, 2017. Now, this one is set around the Queen's 90th birthday, but why did you choose 2016, not 2018, not today?
I know. Well, it started off as extreme laziness, really. I thought I want them to be quite recent. I don't want them to be contemporary, because you never know what's going to happen with the royal family. So, I mean, I was sort of thinking about this a couple of years ago, and things were good with the Queen, but I thought I'll set it at a time that's slightly in the past, when everything was definitely great, and it will just make my life easier. And I didn't actually intend to make it very specific. I thought it would be people would tell it was quite recent, but it wouldn't be exact. And then I discovered that every time the Queen has official duties, they go in the Times, the London Times newspaper, and it's called the Royal Circular. And every day they say what she'll be doing, and it's online now. So I discovered that I could find out everything she did officially every day back in a particular year. And I ended up thinking her 90th birthday might be fun, because it was a really spectacular, there are 1,000 horses, at the Windsor Horse Show for that kind of thing. And then I discovered, I just became quite a challenge to see if I could fit my whole murder plot around what she was really doing. So I did. And so the first book is set very much around the 90th birthday celebrations, and the Obamas came to visit. And I was listening to Becoming on audiobook when I was writing it. So I was very aware of Michelle Obama's recollections. And I thought, I'm going to weave those in, actually. So that was fun. And now I've just finished writing book 2. And I thought, well, that was interesting. But the second half of 2016, not much happened then, surely. So that'll be quite a sort of gentle book. It won't have anything political in it. And then I realized, actually, there was the Brexit referendum in the UK, and you had the elections. So that book became even more political than the first one.
That's funny. So since you just mentioned the Obamas being in the book, and we just have a question, normally I save the questions for the end, but this one lines up with my next question. So Susan was wondering, did you need special permission from the Queen to use her in your stories? And my question is essentially, were there special hoops to jump through with legal to use these real life figures in your stories?
Great question. I really thought about this and worried about it to start with when I had the idea. I thought it was going to be my biggest hurdle. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, Alan Bennett, who I'm not related to, sadly, he's already written about the Queen fictionally a lot. He wrote this lovely, lovely book called The Uncommon Reader, and he wrote another, a play called A Question of Attribution, which was on the BBC a long time ago. And then Peter Morgan came along and he wrote The Crown and he wrote The Queen, and we're getting fictionalized royal family on our screens all the time these days. So it's kind of been done. And another very popular writer in the UK, Sue Townsend, has also done it. I mean, other people have as well. Millions of people have.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt that I was kind of treading a well-trodden path with that. But the other thing was, I feel if you're going to take the lives of real people who are really doing their best and you're going to fictionalize them, then I think you've got to be kind. I think you've got to make them not do horrible things that they wouldn't do in real life. I think that's just too mean. So I think these books they're as authentic as I can make them about the people that I kind of see from a distance. And they are pretty kind, so hopefully that's okay. And similarly with the little Obama scene, it's very short, but anything that's described about their visit is something that I've read either in Becoming or elsewhere, something that really happened, and then I just very slightly imagine what they're thinking. But because it's a murder mystery, I hope people will realize that, you know, it's not built up of diary entries or anything. If I go into their heads, I made it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say the portrayal is respectful and kind and everything you said. Like everyone's going to love the Queen in this book. Like she's a great character, and I can't imagine there would be problems with it. But it's just you know, it's an interesting question. So
well, and just on that one, it's worth adding perhaps also that, I mean, she's not 100% the Queen that we all know, I guess, because I really wanted to write a kind of golden age murder mystery, and I'm a massive fan of Dorothy Sayers, and I love Agatha Christie, and I actually really love Rex Stout. So she's a little bit Poirot, she's a little bit less Miss Marple, she's a little bit Lord Peter Wimsey, and she's a little bit Nero Wolfe, and Rosie is a little bit Archie Goodwin. So where the Queen kind of diverges from the Queen we know, it's more to become a classic golden age detective, I guess.
Excellent. Yeah, the Nero Wolfe Archie Goodwin parallels are certainly there. Like it made me think that as well, and in the best possible way. Okay. We love those stories. I think Josephine Tay has a story where her detective is bedridden and has someone out doing the legwork for them also, and it's always fun to kind of have that set up. So I'm glad to hear that there will be more. So on that note, the book is light and fun and charming and just a wonderful escape, but it deals with some dark topics. So did you find it hard to balance putting serious notes in there and keeping the book light and fun?
The short answer is no. I mean, it's my first. Well, it's not actually my first detective story. It's my fourth, but it's the first one that got published. And it's the first one I've written in many years. And so I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do and how it was going to work. And it took a year to find the voice and all of that kind of thing. Once I did, I mean, it's kind of ended up being quite funny, I hope. That's what people tell me. But I kind of didn't intend it to be. I just wrote something that I would enjoy reading. And I'm really fascinated by politics. So I wanted to get some real politics in there. But I also love P.G. Wodehouse, and I love those kind of British comic novels. So it just ended up being a natural mix of things that I like, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And it is very funny. So I think you achieved in that endeavor. So as I mentioned in your bio, you've written for younger audiences, for teenagers for some time. Yeah. Why a crack at an adult book, and why is this one? Because you could have made this for teenagers too and just changed some things. Like, why did you decide to write an adult mystery with this one?
I had decided that I wanted to write for adults first. Well, actually, I couldn't quite decide. I knew I didn't want to write for young adults anymore, because in the UK, it's a really tough market. I think in the US, you know, it's still doing incredibly well, but young adult writers in the UK do find it very, very tough to make a living out of it. And I wanted to make a living out of my writing. And instead of getting easier and easier, the better I got known, it got harder and harder. So I thought, right, I need to do something else. And I pitched a picture book, actually. That was my first thought. But I pitched it to the Tate Gallery, and because I knew somebody there, and they said, actually, could you write this other book for us? So I ended up writing a book called The Bigger Picture, which is about women artists from around the world who have work at the Tate. And it's one of my favorite books that I've written. It's this large illustrated picture book. And that was wonderful, but it was still for young adults, funnily enough. And then I thought, well, I'll write some middle grade because I adore middle grade. Yeah. I absolutely adore it, but I can't write it. I try and I can't do it. I can't write to that word length. It's just a thing. So my other idea was to go back to what I loved reading when I was growing up, and that was crime. And so it was a very deliberate career decision to just do something new. I had to, and I wanted to, and it's been joyful. But it is interesting. One of the reasons I changed my name from Sophia Bennett to SJ Bennett is because I would tell friends, you know, I'm writing this book about a 90-year-old woman, and the crime involves autoerotic asphyxiation, and they would say, "Oh, is it another young adult book?" No, it's not. Yeah, I thought if I change my name, it will make it quite clear that it's not quite the same.
That's funny. So again, I normally save questions to the end, but this one also came up just at the exact same time as I was going to ask about research. So I was wondering if there are any particularly fun tidbits or favorite stories that you came across in doing research for this book. And then Brittany also was going to say that she saw a map of Windsor on your website. What kind of research did you do on the grounds?
Oh, that's so good. Yes. Thanks to William Morrow, I have an interactive map on the website. People are very welcome to go there. It's next door to the book club guide. So yeah, it's all there. And I had to do a lot of research for the map. Well, the book was inspired by a trip I did to Windsor Castle with my son a few years ago. And this is when I learned about dine and sleeps. And so perhaps, I mean, to me, this is all just kind of, I just know this stuff now, but there was a time when I didn't know what a dine and sleep was. And I will share this with you because a lot of people say, is that real? The Queen really does, when it's not a pandemic, have dinner parties at Windsor Castle where she invites about 20 people. And they all sit round the table in the state dining room, which is not actually that large. It's very cozy when you're in it. And they have dinner, and then they have some entertainment, and then they sleep over. And this is the thing that I love. So she puts them up around the castle, and the staff hang up their clothes for them, and it's all terribly glamorous. And then they have breakfast there the next morning, and they go. And the thing that excited me wasn't so much the dinner; it was the breakfast the next morning. Actually, it's like, wow! Imagine waking up in Windsor Castle and just thinking, well, I'll just pop downstairs and have breakfast now. And I just wanted to do it. So, and when I investigated it, the one that I read about was the people she'd invited that day were Tim Peake, who is our most famous astronaut in the UK, and Delia Smith, who is our most famous cookery writer. And I just thought, what an insane dinner that would be. Astronaut one side, cookery writer the other side, Queen and Prince Philip in the middle. That's just mad. So I love the fact that she does that. I don't know, there were all sorts of little details about her life. I mean, I like the fact that she does sit up and write her diaries every night. She handwrites them. Nobody's ever read them. They won't be read, I think, for years after she dies, but they will be stored at Windsor Castle along with everybody else's. Again, I mean, I love the fact that the Windsor Horse Show, where there are now, 1,000 horses for her birthday, but it was set up during the war, I think it was, but certainly one of the very early ones raised money for aeroplanes for the war effort. And it used to have dogs. This is another of my favorite facts that's in the book. It used to have dogs as well. It was dogs and horses, fair enough. But one of the dogs ate the king's sandwich, and the king was so annoyed that dogs were then thenceforth banned, so they don't compete anymore. I thought that was quite fun as well.
Well, I saw she just got another corgi. It made me very happy.
Well, she said, I talk about this in book 2. Ask me about royal dogs, I will tell you. She used to have 2 corgis and 2 dorgies in 2016. And then gradually the corgis died off, and then the dorgies. It was really sad. And she wasn't going to replace them because she didn't want them to outlive her too long. She just thought it was sad for them. They didn't have her around. And also they're a trip hazard, which is kind of funny, kind of sad. Yeah. But obviously, it's just been decided, look, she needs something good in her life, something soft and cuddly. And in the books, whenever she's feeling stressed about something, she does actually pat a corgi or rub her ankle against it, because I imagine that's what she would do. Yeah. And so I'm really pleased she's got 2 corgi puppies to do that with now. I think it's wonderful.
Oh, it made me unreasonably happy when I read this sheet, because I thought it's so sad that she's she's thrown in the towel on dogs. Like I'm too old to get another dog, and she's always had all the dogs running around. So
Yeah.
but you're right. I had a corgi as a little girl, and they are low to the ground and definite trip hazards.
Yeah, and quite bitey. Apparently, they're not popular with the royal staff.
Well, it's pretty funny. Well, you know, I guess whatever the queen wants, though.
Where the queen wants. Yeah, that's the way it works. There was a story I heard on the radio, and it kind of fed into the book in different ways. It's not obviously there, but there was a surgeon, I think called David Knot, who used to work out in Syria before that was just too lethal. He used to go out to Syria every year and train rebel kind of Syrian surgeons how to operate under fire, and it was enormously stressful, obviously. And he was invited to the palace. I don't know which one it was, can't remember, and to lunch with the Queen. And there were other people there, and he was sitting next to her, and she asked him about it. And he said, it's really weird. You know, when you're talking to the Queen, it's really different from talking to kind of anybody else. And for the first time, he just couldn't talk about it. And, you know, I heard him on this radio interview, and he could talk about it on Radio 4 on the BBC, but he just couldn't talk about it. And she saw how emotional he was becoming thinking about it all. And she asked one of the footmen to bring the corgis along, and then they just petted the corgis for the rest of the lunch. And he said nobody else had kind of treated him with that level of consideration, really. And I just thought, oh, that's adorable.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. That's great. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the writing process. Obviously, you've written a lot. So what does your average writing day look like? And do you have any little rituals, like a certain beverage or music in the background? You sit down and write. What's it look like?
Okay. Well, it looks like I should have sat down and written about 2 or 3 hours before I actually do. So let's not pretend that I waft out of bed at 6:30 in the morning and write for a couple of hours before I send the kids to school, because that never, ever happens. I faff about far too much on social media, and I go through all my emails, all the things I shouldn't do, I do. When I eventually get to it, I have to have a cup of tea. Sounds so English, but I do. And then another cup of tea. And my shed's at the bottom of the garden, my writing shed. So I'm always going backwards and forwards and getting cups of tea. and I listen to songs on Spotify. There's a lovely Jessie Ware song at the moment that I'm very, very fond of. So I have songs on a loop, and I listen to them hundreds and hundreds of times, so they don't even hear them anymore.
Right.
And I listen to kind of chill Ibiza kind of music as well. The 07 is a really favorite band of mine, the most favorite probably, and I don't listen to their stuff otherwise, but when I'm writing, it's perfect. There's a song called Warm Sound that I write to a lot, and then just as I'm really getting into it in the afternoon, it's time for my kids to come back from school, and they need feeding, and my brain just knows when I've only got half an hour left, and that's when it really gets going. But the best scenes tend to get written at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that every now and again, I'm kind of really into it. My husband says, just write. I can see this working. Just go for it. And then finally, you know, the world gets quiet. And I've written a lot of opening scenes at 2 o'clock in the morning, actually, because I don't always write the opening scene first because they're so hard. So yeah, I like to do that when there's really nobody else around. So
this book is obviously a mystery, which requires, especially as you said, like with that golden age feel, like a tightly woven plot. Did you outline? Did you just sit down and write? How did that work out for you?
This is going to sound mad. I teach writing, and this was my 11th published book. I didn't know it was going to get published, but anyway, it turned out to be. And I'd written 3 or 4 others before that. But I hadn't written a successful crime one, and I really did Google kind of 101 crime plot, how to write. And it just so happened that I landed on this kind of 12 steps to a great crime novel thing that just worked for me. And I've seen plenty of others that didn't really gel with me, but this particular 12-step thing worked out really nicely. It's like the detective knows this much at this point, and then at this point they discover a new track, and at this point the subplot comes in, and I just did what I was told, and it really helped me out. So I had that, and I always kind of know who did it and why and how, and then I build in the red herrings. And I live with it for months and months and months as it gets more complicated and I get to know the characters. And then it goes into a spreadsheet, which sounds more sophisticated than it is, but it's just lines of what happens when. And then I get my court circular out and all my other research, and I map it against what's really happening in the world. And then, in the nature of things, it always changes in the writing process. There's a particular scene in the book that I've just finished writing, book 2, where the Queen is unveiling a painting. And that scene was not supposed to be in there. I wanted her to do something else, and I just wanted to know what she was wearing that day. And in Googling her outfit, I discovered that actually what she was doing was unveiling a painting. It wasn't in the court circular even, it was just in the papers. Wow. And because the book 2 is about art, it just fitted what I was writing about a lot. And it's also about women. And anyway, it worked really well. So that's my favorite thing, really, when something happens that you weren't expecting and it kind of becomes something important.
Does that happen with the character ever when you're writing and maybe things aren't exactly clicking and you realize that the character wants to go off in a different direction?
Yeah, I love that so much. I remember the first time it really happened to me, I guess, was in book 2 of my Thread series. So when I was writing young adult, and I had a character there who was actually from Uganda called Crow, and she was a dress designer. And she was in a meeting with a really overbearing character who ran a fashion empire. And he was telling her that she would have to give up her name because her clothes had her fashion brand on it. And he was telling her she'd have to give up her name if she wanted him to continue to support her. And she didn't agree with his ethics. So I didn't know what she was going to do. And to my astonishment, and I didn't know how I was going to deal with this, she got up and she walked out of the room and she was prepared to give up her own name for the sake of her principles. And I was in tears writing that scene because it was so lovely to see her kind of do her own thing. And then I had another character in the Thread series who was supposed to be on the cover of Vogue. What fun. And she was a teenager, she was 15, and she was very self-conscious. And I was writing the scene where she was posing for the photographer. And she just would not be happy. And I tried. And then I had to sort of think about it and think, she is a self-conscious 15-year-old girl who doesn't believe that this is going to work, and she hates it. And then I wrote the scene that she couldn't do it, and she didn't get the Vogue cover in the end, and that worked so much better. So I love those scenes because it means the character's really kind of taken over, and it's wonderful.
I love the stories too when I hear this happens. There, some authors say, no, of course I'm writing the book, like I'm in control of my characters. But I love when this like kind of weird magical moment happens, because a lot of authors say that it manifests itself essentially as something's not working and they realize that they're not being true to the characters. So anyway, I think it's great. It's always a good story. Let's see. Do you have, I know what I was going to say. You were just talking about the next book that's about women and art. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
So it's set in Buckingham Palace. So my idea when I thought about, I had this idea, oh my God, the Queen would make a great detective. And then the next thing that came to me was settings. Oh my goodness, I can set one at Windsor Castle. That was always going to be the first one. And then I thought, but I could do one at Buckingham Palace. I could do one at Sandringham. I could do one at Balmoral. I could do one on the Royal Yacht Britannia. So book 2 is Buckingham Palace. And in book 1, she calls Buckingham Palace the office on the roundabout. So my fictional queen doesn't like Buckingham Palace particularly, and I don't actually either. It's very useful for its purpose, but it's not great to live in. So it's set there, and Buckingham Palace has a swimming pool. And as soon as a mystery writer knows that there's a swimming pool, you've kind of got to put a body in it, haven't you? So there's a body in the pool. And there are tunnels, so shall there not be a body in the tunnels? So yeah, it's about the Queen as a collector, I guess, and as I was going to say a performer, but as somebody who has art made of her, and living in this incredibly grand surroundings, which actually she's not so much a grand person, really. Yeah. So I'm very interested by that. And the women thing, it was really because, there's a scene when, Hillary Clinton was just about to accept the presidency under the biggest glass ceiling in Manhattan, and she couldn't. And that became the theme of the book to me in a way. Older women, how older women are treated and what they have to deal with, I guess. And I hadn't been a theme I started with at all, but it became a kind of guiding principle when I was writing it.
It sounds wonderful. Actually, I think you've made the most brilliant decision with all the different locations that are built in here. Like, I didn't think about it, but you're right. I mean, realistically, you have a setting for a whole series, and they never have to be set in the same place.
Well, and even if they are, they don't have to be set in the same time. So once I've done these 4, I want to do Paris in the 50s, and I want to do Virginia in the 80s maybe, and I want to do Hong Kong. But then I can go back to Buckingham Palace in the 50s, and I think that will be really fascinating.
Yeah.
So I have to become a sort of more of a historical writer then. So hopefully people will be able to help me do that.
Well, it must be nice too, because there are plenty of documents that you can access knowing what was happening with the Queen at that time. Like, there's no shortage of historical research you can do.
I know, bless her heart. I mean, I don't think she enjoyed living in the public eye, but it helps people like me out tremendously. I'll never be sure to be real.
Absolutely. So I have a 3-part reading taste question.
Okay.
So the first part, I'm happy to repeat. Everyone needs me to repeat. Who are some of your writing influences?
Okay.
Who are some of your favorite authors? Like, who do you always read their work, or have you read all their work? And what have you read and loved recently? So we can start with influences.
Influences, gosh, it's so tricky. Well, as I say, in terms of people I think back to with what I'm writing now, and in terms of how did they do this, I read all the Poirot short stories before I wrote The Windsor Knot, of which there are many, many.
Yes.
And I wanted to see what the rules were. And what I loved, what I really gained from it was, if there was a rule, Agatha Christie deliberately broke it. So first person, third person, point of view of the detective, point of view of the criminal, point of view of the victim, she tried it all. And having done it, she might not do it again. And so I felt really freed to do whatever I felt like from that point of view. That was great. And, even when you've got a sort of fixed detective, she still mixed it up.
Sure.
So I love that. Dorothy Sayers, yeah, I mean, particularly because I guess she's got an aristocratic detective. I'm bound to be influenced by that. And having a detective who doesn't move and a sidekick who moves a lot, wouldn't have done that if I hadn't read Rex Stout. Yeah. So he's definitely there. And then it's really interesting. I mean, she'd be astonished, I think, to imagine that she influenced me. But Kate Atkinson's books, I absolutely adore. And I love the way that she mixes mystery and social commentary. So in as much as I have any social commentary in there, then that's probably inspired by her. So yeah.
It's interesting. Case Histories, the first Jackson Brodie book of hers, if you ask any of my staff members, they will tell you, I don't necessarily say this statement, but they will tell you it's my favorite book in the store because of how many times I've hand sold it over the years. And I think that what she does so masterfully is she tells different women's stories and weaves them together. And it's such a feat with a male detective doing the legwork on these investigations. I love Case Histories, and she writes so beautifully. So
he doesn't kind of really investigate, does he? He just sort of, he empathizes tremendously to the point where he knows what's going on. It's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and have you read anything recently that you have loved that you want to tell people about?
Yes, I mean, not everyone's going to love it, but I completely adore Mick Herron's writing. I've just finished Slow Horses and Dead Lions, and I'm going to work my way through the series. He is a writer. I read his sentences and I think, we need to go out for a drink, Mick, because I love what you do with the English language. You just, you fight it the same way that I love to fight it. And I can feel you doing something that your English teacher told you not to do when you're a teenager, and now you're just showing off because you can. And I love how funny his books are, and they're so intricately plotted as well. So yeah, and his London is absolutely right. So Mick Herron is my latest discovery, and I also adore Robert Macfarlane for landscape and all that kind of thing. And I think the times we're living in at the moment, it's really lovely to be able to mentally get outside, even if you can't as much as you want to physically. So Robert Macfarlane's writing on any kind of landscape, I've been loving.
Wonderful. I just want to remind everyone that you can certainly ask questions. Everyone's just sitting back and being quiet here. We have a question from Katie I'm going to get to after my last one, which is, what fictional character would you most like to be best friends with?
Oh, I mean, Lord Peter Wimsey is up there. So Reginald Jeeves. I mean, I am such a PG Woodhouse. I think Bertie Wooster would drive me a little bit mad. But yeah, if I could be sitting in the kitchen polishing the silver to help Jeeves out, and we could have some little quiet conversations, I would be very much up for that. And he could teach me all these fantastic quotations that Bertie Wooster almost knows but doesn't quite remember. I'd love to be friends with Jeeves.
That's a great answer. So fun. Okay, so we do have a question from Katie. You make brief mentions of the other royals in the novel, but do you foresee weaving them, like Charles, the grandchildren, etc., into the plot lines of future novels?
A little bit, not massively. I like them to have, to sort of pop in every now and again. So I have Princess Anne a little bit in book 2. I will have Harry a little bit in book 3, because it's the Christmas of 2016 when the Queen is at Sandringham and he was there with her. I'm not going to make it massively about their lives. I mean, going back to your first question, I suppose is, how do I feel about writing about these real people? And I think the poor Queen, she's got used to it, but her life kind of is public property. Yeah. But I feel like every step you get away from her, those lives are less and less public property. So I don't want to sort of major on them quite so much. I mean, I would adore to write a series with Princess Charlotte one day, but I don't think I would, because by the time she's old enough for that to be okay, I'll be way too old to write it, sadly.
That's great. So we don't have any more questions, but I guess we've covered it. I mean, all I can say is the book is absolutely wonderful. You've answered all my questions. Are there any other research tidbits or anything else that you want to share with us about Windsor or the Queen or what you're working on?
Let me think. Tricky. It's such early days for me, because the book's only been out in America for less than a week. So yeah, I'm not sure yet. I'm so kind of immersed in all of this that I'm not sure what people kind of do and don't know yet, and what they are and aren't interested in.
So I have a specific question. You have a Russian musician being murdered in this book.
Oh yeah.
As part of one of the dine-in sleeps, is that what you call them?
Yeah.
So for these dinner parties, does the Queen normally have entertainment or special people brought in, or is it just a quiet dinner party?
Good question. I don't think she does. I did make that up, actually. She takes them to the library. She has the most extraordinary library. And it does have, the book mentions, Russian volumes and that kind of thing. And it does have incredible stuff. So she takes them to the library, and the librarian will have looked at their careers and their interests. And, like, let's say Tim Peake, if the Queen has anything astronomical that he might be interested in, that will be laid out especially for him to see. So it's very thoughtful that way. So she does that. No, I don't think, I mean, that's the lovely thing about writing fiction is, I don't know whether there's even a grand piano that could be moved around for him to play. I just thought, I can make this up. I researched it for a couple of hours, and then I thought, I'm writing a novel. I don't even care.
I'm sure the Queen did a grand piano delivered if she needed a grand piano delivered. I'm sure it could be arranged.
I mean, I think it probably could be, but there's lots of bits of family stuff in there, because my father was in the army and then he was in the NHS, and in both of those jobs, I mean, between the two, he was in there for about 40 years. He met her about a dozen times, and there were times when they were just one-on-one together. And that did spark a lot of little kind of anecdoty things. So I know it annoys some readers, but the book does describe the Queen as glowing and glittering in a couple of places. But it is just a fact, a bit like Marilyn Monroe in that way. The Queen has skin that seems to glow and glitter. It's a thing. She's got very, very good skin. I mean, obviously she's very short, but she's also, you know, quite often in the evening surrounding that skin with diamonds and pearls and stuff, and that doesn't do any harm in terms of so she's quite glittery, which I thought was very nice. My mother noticed that when she met her. So yeah, I've put in a lot of little family anecdotes, and I hope old family friends might sort of vaguely recognize themselves as transmuted into some of the characters, which is quite fun. There are at least a couple of family friends who are in there. And then there's this kind of serious politics stuff as well, because I'm fascinated by that. So, you know, the book talks about the killing of Russians on British soil, and that's all true. Yeah. And the killing of Russian journalists on Russian soil, and that's all true too. So it's lovely for me to be able to kind of weave all my interests. And then in book 2, because I love art history, there's probably more than there should be about women painters in history, because I like that kind of thing. So yeah.
Wonderful. We do have a question from Susan. She wanted to know specifically, how do you come up with the ideas for the murder?
Well, the Windsor Knot was an interesting one, because I was writing it and I was on chapter 3 of a version that was not working very well at all. And there was a body laid out on a slab in the kitchens at Windsor, and it had been stabbed. And I didn't know how or why. And I was talking to my husband about it and saying, it's not really working. And he said, well, what about the title? And I always knew it was going to be called The Windsor Knot. And I said, I know, I really want something, but what could it be that fits the title? So my husband came up with the death in the Windsor Knot. And I wanted the knot to be important. So I investigated autoerotic asphyxiation. And when they talk about, you know, the book talks about the Queen and her private secretary, imagine how it was done and wish they hadn't. That was me very much doing my research and thinking, oh, golly. And so I learned about this business of the second knot. So that became very useful in terms of plotting. But yeah, that was born of the title. And then book 2, funnily enough, my editor said that the way originally, the precise way the murder was done in book 2, my editor said he just didn't believe it. And it's actually completely true. It's something that happened to someone. But, you know, it's one of those things where I changed it because, you know, it has to sound plausible. The fact that it's real isn't quite the same somehow. So I made it less true, but more plausible.
You know, it's one of those, like, if someone wrote the past year, no one would believe it in our real lives. So yeah, you absolutely have to have that credibility, even if it's reality in your book. So.
There's a book by a lovely guy called Andy Martin called Reacher Said Nothing. About Lee Child writing the 20th book. Have you come across it?
Yes, yeah.
And I love him describing Lee Child writing a particular scene where somebody was firing a gun, and Andy saying, so, you know, you go to a firing range and, you know, get a feel for it. And he said, no, I don't care how it really works. I know how to describe it in a way that the reader will feel that they've got the sense of it, and that's more important than how it really works. And I bear that in mind. I still do too much research, but I try and bear that in mind.
Well, it sounds like you enjoy the research, so like there's some pleasure to that. You know, Lee is notorious for not doing any research. Years and years ago, he set a book in West Texas, and we had customers come in wanting to know when he had been there, where he had visited, and, you know, he had to tell everyone that he had never been to West Texas, but everyone was so certain that he got it right. So it's just
interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that he, you know, I guess knows how to give the reader what they seek is the accurate representation of what he's doing. So
I love that. Yeah, he's part of his amazing magic.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. This has been a treat for me. Like I said, we're absolutely in love with the book. I can't wait to read the second one. And for those of you who are watching, if you are so inclined, we'd love if you would consider ordering a copy from us. The link is in there. And thank you so much to you, Sophia, for taking the time to join us. I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. It's been really lovely.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And maybe next time the world will be in a better place where we could see you in store. We'll have to come overseas and visit. All right. Thank you. Bye.